This is just horrifying. In 2011, Daniel Bartlett, who was 14 years old at the time, ran out of his burning house with his younger brother and dog. They waited for the emergency services to arrive, and when the police questioned Daniel, he told them that someone had broken into the house and harmed his mother and then set the house on fire. But after this initial statement, Daniel told the police the very disturbing and sickening truth. He said that he crept into his mother's room at night with a claw hammer in his hand. He then stood over his own mother while she slept, and as he looked down on her, he raised the hammer and hit her in the head 7 times. And after he was done, he poured gasoline around her bedroom and then set the house on fire. The disturbing thing is, Daniel's mother was only identified through her dental records, and as the police searched the house, they found the hammer used in the attack in Daniel's bedroom. They also found a document on his computer where he written a story featuring a character with his name. Another disturbing part about this case was that a popular TV show in the UK called Coronation Street had recently showed a story where one of the characters murdered a woman with a hammer, and the storyline in the TV show resembled a striking resemblance of what Daniel had done. The police also found TV clips of the scene from the episode of Coronation Street, along with other violent scenes from the popular TV films on Daniel's computer. The media then gave Daniel the nickname the Coronation Street Killer. Daniel's stepfather had also spoken about Daniel's behavior before the awful incident took place, and he said that he had plastic boxes full of Star Wars and Doctor Who figures, and Daniel would just urinate in the boxes. Daniel also defecated all over his bedroom, and what's strange is Daniel was raised by his mother in a very stable home, and by all accounts, Daniel was a normal young boy. The family had moved to a different area in 2009, and that's the year he began to become more reclusive, spending most of his time in his bedroom playing video games and watching horror films. His stepfather blamed the video games and the horror films on why Daniel murdered, but I don't believe that at all. Daniel said that he killed his mother because of an argument that they had, and she called him a freak. But with no evidence of abuse in the home, the motive is still unclear. Daniel was found guilty of murder. This whole case is just sad, especially because everyone that knew Daniel's mother said that she lived for her children and was a warm, loving mother.
A very gruesome video game.
A game?
It could have potentially caused a murder or inspired a murder. Manhunt. I don't know if you ever seen or played the game and shit. It was a PlayStation 2 game that released in 2003.
I've never heard or played it before.
Nah. The whole concept of this game is that you're basically a convict. You're on death row, getting the death penalty and shit. But it doesn't work. You wake up and some guy had put an earpiece in your ear and he's telling you what to do. He's like, yo, I got you with freedom, but you have to do everything I tell you.
Okay.
There's gonna be cameras everywhere you go, and you're basically going to be making movies for me. So the whole video game is just you going around brutally criminals and stuff, right? But some of the scenes are so gory and shit that for its time, like I said, it's just disturbing.
Yeah.
This video game was also banned in Italy, Australia, Ireland, and different parts of the world because of how
gory it was.
Yeah, and how violent, and people believe that it would inspire people to start performing those like violent acts. Funny thing is too, I remember me and my brother playing this game.
For real?
Yes.
God.
See what I was saying, bro?
Bro just decapitated. Oh my gosh.
The reason why this even happened was because of the game. A year after the game was released, Warren LeBlanc, he ended up luring his friend Stefan Pakira to a park, and he beat him with like a claw hammer.
Just to make you all aware, these are his words, not mine. He murdered his dad because he was riding his ass. It was 11:20 p.m. on the 7th of December 2024 in Bartow, Florida. Police got a frantic call from a woman called Susan Voigt shouting that her son had shot her. Police raced over to the house in question. They were obviously aware that there was potentially a suspect there that was armed and dangerous. But there really was no time to waste. This woman could be fighting for her life potentially. When they showed up though, they found an actual murder scene. Not only had the mum Susan been shot, but there was a dad called Marvin lying deceased on the floor with gunshot wounds to his head. Inside the home, they found Susan absolutely terrified and seriously injured, and they raced her to a local hospital for treatment, and thankfully she survived. But her killer son Joseph was nowhere to be seen. Now, he clearly had fled the scene in a panic and was incredibly dangerous to the general public. So officers scoured the local area. They had loads of police units out looking for his vehicle. They'd thankfully been able to pull his vehicle details, so they were on high alert. They were driving up and down, looking down any roads that they could for the sign of his car. Then at 2 a.m. they finally tracked him down. And he admitted everything. He said that he had shot his mum and dad after a family argument. He claimed that his dad was, quote, riding his ass, end quote, about making something of himself and getting a job. He said that his parents had told him that he was spending far too much time on video games. And when the police ran his details through the system, they found that he had got an extensive criminal history. He'd had arrests for firing a weapon in a residential area and also battery. He was charged with murder for murdering his dad and the attempted murder of his mum, and has pleaded guilty.
Now this is truly disturbing footage. Watch as Bianca Ellis, a killer, stalks a mother and her young child as they walk out of a grocery store. Notice how Bianca is carrying a knife with her. You won't even believe what happens next. The woman in that video was 32-year-old Bianca Devins. And after she walked off camera in that video, she stabbed the 3-year-old child to death and also stabbed the child's mother, Margot. The victim, 3-year-old Julian Wood, was a normal boy. And according to everyone reporting on this case, he and his mother had no connection to Bianca whatsoever. This was a completely random act of violence. Bianca can be seen in that extended security camera footage brandishing a knife while walking around the store, scoping out potential victims. And then, like I showed you at the beginning, towards the end, she identifies the mother and her son for some reason and follows them out to the parking lot where she stabbed them. Disturbingly, in a recent court appearance, Bianca can actually be seen smiling, laughing, and giggling as charges of murder are read against her. And like I said before, it's unknown why she carried out this attack, and prosecutors right now are saying this was a completely random act of violence. I'm going to keep you guys updated on the story here, but if you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast that I co-host with my wife Courtney, Murder in America. It's available on all streaming platforms.
When you're young, people will always tell you stories of kids who have gone missing to try and keep you safe and aware of your surroundings. And one of the stories that I was told was of Kayla Berg and how she disappeared into thin air after supposedly being dropped off at an abandoned house. Her story was so disturbing to me, especially because it seems clear who was responsible, yet they were never charged. And it's always kind of stuck with me. But her disappearance resurfaced when this really creepy video was uploaded to YouTube in 2016 titled Hi Walter.
Hi Walter. I was at the mall today and guess what happened? I met the most wonderful girl. We went shopping at JCPenney's and she tried on a lot of clothes. And she ended up buying a whole lot of them, you know what I mean? And then we decided to go and take a look at some of the jewelry at K Jewelers, and she picked out this most awesome necklace, the most amazing necklace I've ever seen. And I know she wanted me to buy it for her because she kept on looking at me and kept on giving me that look, you know the look. And then we got kind of tired of the mall, and I brought her back to my place. And I know she hates cameras, Walter, but I'm gonna show you her anyways. You ready?
It went viral because the girl in the video resembled Kayla, and some thought that it was actually her. It was found to be a fake video and not her, but it was really disturbing, and for some reason I can't stop thinking about it, so let's talk about it. So in May of 2009, 15-year-old Kayla was living with her mom in Texas when she found out that her dad had been diagnosed with cancer. The two had recently moved to Texas from Wisconsin because Kayla's mom wanted a fresh start and a new job. So the two packed up and moved together. Kayla did have an older brother, but he stayed behind in Wisconsin with her dad because he was over 18 and decided that that's what he wanted to do. But their move was cut short when Kayla's dad got cancer, and as his health started to decline, she decided she wanted to move back home to Antigua to be closer to him in case anything were to happen. So the two packed up their bags once again and moved back to Wisconsin. But it wasn't long after being back that Kayla started to get into some trouble. She wasn't doing anything crazy, but she was doing what 15-year-olds sometimes do, like go to parties out of town with her friends, and they would sometimes meet up with older guys. It's definitely dangerous, don't get me wrong, but I feel like we've all done this a time or two in the past. In early August of 2009, Kayla and one of her friends went to a party, but they didn't tell either of their parents where they were at. And when they didn't hear from them all night and into the next morning, their parents started to panic. And literally as they were filling out a police report, the girls called them to let them know that they were okay. And it seemed like everything was good. But just a few days later, the feeling of panic for Kayla's mom would return, except this time it would never leave. On August 11th, Kayla was picked up from her dad's house in Antigua by a family friend named Kevin. Kevin was 24 years old and was her older brother's friend of several years, and he was pretty close to the family, always over at the house. He wasn't a stranger by any means, and even though he was quite a bit older than Kayla, no one really questioned anything because of how close he was to the family. But behind closed doors, Kevin was reportedly supplying WEED and smoking it with Kayla. So that night, the two went on a car drive together, and at 9:30 p.m. they stopped at a McDonald's where Kayla ran into one of her friends who was working there. They made plans to talk to each other later that night, but this never happened, as Kayla mysteriously disappeared after this. And no one knew it, but this would be the last time that Kayla was ever seen alive. When Kayla failed to return home, her dad called her mom to let her know, and this is when her mom kind of started her own little investigation. She didn't necessarily want to involve the police just yet because of the recent encounter they all had when Kayla went to the party, and at this point she was really just trying not to worry. Kayla was known to spend a night or two with her friends and sometimes not say anything, so her mom started calling all of her friends, but they all had no idea where Kayla was. This is when she learned that the last person who was known to be with her was Kevin, so she tried calling him, but oddly enough, his phone was either dead or turned off, and he didn't answer Kayla's mom for hours. But even then, Kevin only chose to text her, and he was saying a lot of back and forth things. At one point, he told her, quote, "I don't remember, there's a lot of one-way streets in Wausau," end quote. But eventually, he told her that he dropped Kayla off somewhere in Wausau. She again tried not to worry, especially because she knew Kevin fairly well, and that made her feel better because at least she wasn't out with a stranger. So then Kayla's mom decided to call Kayla's on-again, off-again boyfriend, 19-year-old Miguel. They weren't dating at the time, but she figured that he could possibly know something. But he didn't know anything either, and it was around 5 days later when she officially reported Kayla missing to the police. Antigua police initially listed Kayla as an endangered runaway, and when none of her friends knew anything, their focus shifted to Kevin, as he was the last known person to be with her. This is when his story starts to get strange, and none of what he says adds up, like at all. Kevin told police that he drove Kayla 35 miles southwest to Wausau because she asked him to drop her off at her boyfriend Miguel's house on Highway 52. This was an immediate red flag because, first of all, Kayla and Miguel weren't dating at the time, but also because Miguel no longer lived at the house where Kevin supposedly dropped her off at, and Kayla knew this. In fact, Miguel's old house had been condemned and abandoned, and he hadn't lived there in quite some time. Kayla was fully aware of this, and had actually gone to a party at his new house just the week before, so there was absolutely no reason for her to have asked Kevin to drop her off at this abandoned house in the middle of the night. According to police, there's actually no proof that Kayla ever even made it to Wausau. It's only what Kevin is saying happened. And there's no digital evidence proving this either. His cell phone data says that he never drove to Wausau that night. Authorities then searched Kevin's home in Deerbrook, where he lived with his parents, and they also seized his car. They were looking for anything they could tying him to Kayla, and items of interest were found, but nothing led them to Kayla. In 2009, Kevin was charged with second-degree reckless endangerment, and it was assumed that he had something to do with Kayla's disappearance, but no one could prove it. Police also focused on Miguel, and after combing through his digital footprint, they found that his phone pinged twice in Lincoln County the night Kayla was last seen, so they decided to search those areas, but again, they found nothing. Miguel never reached out to Kayla's family after she disappeared to help or just check in, which they find odd since the two had a history together. 2 years after her disappearance, a second search at Kevin's parents' house was conducted, as well as a potato farm where he worked. Authorities brought in cadaver dogs which found more items of interest, but still, nothing led them to Kayla. It was at this point that a judge dropped the charges against Kevin because they didn't have enough evidence on him. Over time, there have been multiple searches for Kayla, even involving the National Guard, and police have interviewed so many people, but no trace of Kayla has ever been found. Her case would soon fall cold, but then in 2016, a video titled "Hi Walter" was posted on YouTube that went viral and caused her case to come back to the public eye. So that creepy video quickly went viral, reaching over 3 million views. It's disturbing for obvious reasons, like the girl being tied up in the back, but what made this video go viral was the fact that many people thought that this girl resembled Kayla. This sparked the FBI to get involved, and after tracking the creator of this video down, they found that the video, although weird, was fake, and the girl in it was an actor. So they were able to rule this out, and it's horrible that this was ever connected to Kayla. But her family says that the one good thing to come out of it is that more people know about her story. Although Kayla is still missing, there are still searches for her, even to this day. In 2019, a search was conducted in the Nicollet National Forest, but it didn't provide any clues. And then in 2023, a tip from a Wisconsin inmate led authorities to search in Kewaunee County, which is over 100 miles from Antigo. It wasn't ever specified what this inmate said that made authorities believe him and search in this area, but after cadaver dogs were brought in and after digging for 2 weeks, nothing was ever found. Kayla's family still believes that Kevin knows something, even though he's never been formally charged in connection to her disappearance. So much time has passed, and the McDonald's that Kayla last went to, along with Miguel's old home, has since been torn down. What's heartbreaking is the fact that Kayla's dad lost his battle with cancer just 2 years after Kayla went missing, and he died never knowing what happened to his daughter. It's stories like Kayla's that really disturb me, because even though she vanished into thin air, what happened to her and who was responsible seems so clear, and it's just a shame that she still hasn't had any justice. Her family still wants her story out there, and they definitely deserve answers. But it's now been 16 years, and whatever happened to Kayla that summer night remains a mystery.
A video that was surfacing throughout the internet and shit, and it was about a jinn who had interrupted a conversation on live TV.
Oh, fuck, okay.
So, live show where people call in and basically just ask questions and stuff. But this specific show is a Muslim show.
So it's not related to no spiritual stuff or no like scary
No.
stuff.
It's mainly focused on Islam, Muslim beliefs and stuff. And people call in to speak to the sheikh.
Okay.
I don't really know how to pronounce it. And his name is Abu Muhammad. A woman calls. At first it's a regular like conversation and shit. But then stuff starts getting weird.
Allah's name on the left leg. Also,
On the edge right now.
Just keep watching.
I'm sorry, I can't speak now.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا. Give her the power to continue her speech, Ya Allah.
The visa, one front of my pillow,
Oh
one
my
to carry
god,
with
bro.
me.
Who created you and why? Huh?
She ended up saying bat.
Baal? B-A-A-L? The fucking demon?
What they're saying that was a jinn, which it's not a demon, it's not an angel or anything like that. It's just another spirit that could choose whether it wants to be evil or whether it wants to do good.
If you don't know about the case of the murder on Middle Beach, prepare to be sent down multiple rabbit holes. This case is like a real-life version of Cluedo. Now there is, if you want to watch it, a 4-part documentary on HBO, but if you don't have HBO or you just want the summary, then let's go back to the beginning. It was 2010 in Connecticut, USA. Barbara Hamburg was a wealthy mother of 2 who was 48 years old. She was described by her loved ones as magnetic and compelling. She was beautiful and radiant, and you can just tell from the family videos on the documentary that she's just got this infectious energy. Now, she got married to Jeffrey Hamburg in 1989, and she was really attracted to him because of his good looks, but he was also very driven and very ambitious. He was incredibly successful and ended up becoming a millionaire. The pair also had 2 beautiful children together, their daughter Allie and their son Madison. For outsiders looking in, honestly, they'd be pretty jealous. They seemed to have this dream life. They had nannies, they had a massive house, they were always going on holidays. Money was no problem, they never wanted for anything. But suddenly, in 1991, Jeffrey got fired for his job for alleged unethical business. Well, Jeffrey decided to take matters into his own hands. He massively refuted these claims and he ended up suing the company. He did win. He got $2.7 million compensation. He then decided to start his own company, so he really took this bad situation and turned it around. But Barbara was struggling behind closed doors. Jeffrey was away quite a lot of the time and she really struggled with this. She turned to alcohol to cope with how unhappy she was in her marriage. Ultimately, the pair would end up divorcing in 2005. Now, a bit of a messy court case ensued. Barbara was trying to get child support money, and I believe she was alleging that Jeffrey wasn't paying. I think he came back with the counterclaim that they had this kind of agreement that he was going to pay the mortgage instead. So there was this kind of messy legal battle going on between the two, and ultimately Jeffrey was ordered to pay back a lot of money. They were due to attend court the morning of March the 3rd, 2010. Jeffrey showed up, but Barbara didn't. This was because she was lying murdered outside her home. Horrifically, it was actually her sister Conway that found her and her daughter Allie. They found her lifeless body having been bludgeoned to death on the lawn, and Barbara's body was actually covered with sofa cushions, which they found quite odd. She'd suffered blunt and sharp force injuries, and obviously the town was absolutely shook at this news. In the documentary, Barbara's son Madison actually goes on a bit of a journey to find out more about the crime scene. Madison's actually the one that created this whole documentary, and to be honest, he comes across as a really genuine guy. He seems to just really want to get justice for his mum and find out who her killer is. Barbara's keys and purse were found in the yard, presumably dropped in some sort of struggle, and a wooden weapon was found covered in blood further down the garden. Interestingly, the fact that Barbara's body was covered with these sofa cushions could suggest an element of guilt from the murderer. Could they have wanted to almost like hide their eyes from what they'd done? Immediately, the police started looking into who could potentially have a motive for wanting to kill this mother of two. Obviously, Jeffrey was under the microscope right from day one, but remember, he had an alibi. He was at the courthouse. But the documentary does kind of show Jeffrey in this suspicious light. He's being talked to on the phone by Madison, and he seems to be dodging his son's questions quite a lot. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he is guilty, and the police have ruled him out as a suspect. But Madison said that his dad was, quote, controlling, manipulative, and selfish, end quote. So after clearing Jeffrey, the police started looking at things going on in Barbara's personal life. Now, eerily, the day before the murder, Barbara had had lunch with a friend, and they both saw a man in a ski mask kind of sauntering around the neighborhood looking into Barbara's house. Could this have been the killer scoping out the scene? Interestingly, Barbara had recently started going to AA meetings to try and get help, and had been regularly socializing with a group of other housewives. It actually transpired that she was involved in an illegal peace scheme. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to use the actual term. It turned out there'd also been this kind of rift between the group, and she'd been accused of exploiting vulnerable people. The scheme had been actually set up by Barbara's aunt Jill, and when Jill was imprisoned for her role in it, tensions grew between her and Barbara. Barbara also had quite a strained relationship with her sister, who found her dead. When her sister Conway was battling substance addiction, Barbara actually took her to court. Now, this was about Conway's son, Tyler. She'd actually felt like Conway wasn't really looking after Tyler very well, and she used to kind of take Tyler in and look after him herself. Conway admitted on this documentary to wanting Barbara dead at some points. She literally told Madison himself, the son of this murdered woman, that she wanted revenge, and looked into hiring a hitman to kill not only Barbara but Madison himself too. Now imagine your auntie literally admitting to your face that she looked into trying to get you killed. Barbara's other child, her daughter Allie, was also looked into as a suspect after her mum's death, just due to the strained relationship that the pair had. Allie actually went to South America shortly after the murder. Now, this may be because of grief, it may just be because she wanted to get away from, obviously, the murder of her mother, but some people think that it makes her kind of suspicious. And this case is chillingly still unsolved. With so many people involved and this rabbit hole of all of these people with potential motives, it seems we're now left with more questions than answers.
Really quick question to everybody. What's the conspiracy theory that intrigues you the most? I've been hosting the show The Conspiracy Files on YouTube and streaming platforms for a while now, and there are so many stories that I want to tell. Now, I'm typically more focused on exposing pedophile rings and people who commit crimes against children, because that has been such an institutional problem that has never been addressed in our nation's history. But I've also read extensively on all sorts of different topics, from the JFK assassination to missing 411, aliens, the ancient pyramids, and high-profile deaths that were, made to look like suicides, but we know were actually murders. So yeah, I'm turning to you people now, trying to figure out what I should do a video on next, because there are so many different stories to be told, and honestly, through comments and people reaching out, I have learned so many amazing, crazy things, and been inspired to go down deep, dark rabbit holes, all from just comments that people have left on my work. So drop a comment on this post and let me know what you'd like to see me cover. And even if you don't want to watch my content, just let me know what conspiracy theory intrigues you the most?
I'm sorry, but I will die on the hill that this woman did not end her own life. Because you really mean to tell me that she stabbed herself 20 times with a kitchen knife, and 10 of those were in the neck and back? The police are saying that she ended her own life this way, but how was that possible when she was stabbed multiple times after she was already dead? And not to mention, one of those stab wounds was to her cranial cavity, and this would have immediately killed her, or at the very least rendered her unconscious. Yet she somehow went on to continue stabbing herself. I am not buying it, and if there's ever a case that needs to be reopened, it's this one. This is the mysterious death of Ellen Greenberg, and for some reason the truth is being covered up. So let's talk about it. Ellen Greenberg was a 27-year-old school teacher who lived in Philadelphia when she mysteriously died in 2011. She was described as a really happy, upbeat person, and she had a lot of really good things going for her. One of which was her engagement to her fiancé, Samuel. The two seemed pretty happy, and together they shared an apartment in the Manayunk neighborhood. It was a nice little 2-bedroom apartment up on the 6th floor, and things seemed to be going really well until one fateful night. On January 26, 2011, a major snowstorm and blizzard hit Philadelphia, causing Ellen to leave work early. She got gas around 1:30 p.m. and after getting back home to her apartment, she carried on like usual, making a fruit salad. By all means, everything seemed typical, but by 6:30 that night, Ellen was dead. Her fiancé Samuel had gone to the gym that afternoon around 4:45, and when he got back to their apartment, he said that he couldn't get in. The door seemed to be locked from the inside, and on their specific door, they had one of those swing bar latch locks that usually kind of flip over to lock. So this made Samuel think that Ellen was inside and just forgot to unlock the door. So he started knocking and calling out to her, but he got no response. After a while, Samuel started getting mad that he couldn't get in, and so he started texting Ellen. In total, he texted her 9 times actually, with each text getting more and more angry. He finally said, quote, "Open the door, you better have an excuse," end quote. When Ellen still didn't answer, this is when Samuel said he kicked the door in, forcing it open himself, and when he entered, he discovered a gruesome and chilling scene. Immediately after walking into their apartment, he found Ellen slumped over against some cabinets in the kitchen. There was a 10-inch serrated kitchen knife sticking out of her chest, and blood was everywhere. This is when Samuel said he called 911, but the call seems a little unusual. He told the dispatcher, quote, "I just walked into my apartment. My fiancé is dead on the floor with blood everywhere," end quote. About 2 minutes into the call, the dispatcher told Samuel to try and perform CPR on her, and it was only at this point that he mentioned the knife sticking out of Ellen's chest. So this shocked the dispatcher, but nonetheless she asked what happened, and Samuel said, quote, "She stabbed herself. She fell on a knife," end quote. When police arrived at the scene, Ellen was pronounced dead, and she was found to have suffered from 20 stab wounds. 10 of those were to her back and neck. She also had 11 bruises covering her right arm, abdomen, and right leg, and they were all in different stages of healing. Authorities did a really quick investigation, but almost immediately they treated her death as a suicide. Despite the unusual and really gruesome injuries to her body, Philadelphia police said they found no evidence of a robbery as nothing was missing. It appeared she had been alone at the time of her death, and according to Samuel's statement, the front door had been locked from the inside. Police also say that there were no defensive wounds on Ellen's body, not taking into account the bruises on her body since they seem to have happened days before her death. Authorities were actually so adamant that Ellen must have killed herself right off the bat that they released the scene without calling in the crime scene unit. And this happened just 1 day after Ellen was found stabbed to death. So the apartment was cleaned and sanitized, and by the time police came back 2 days later after obtaining an official search warrant, it was spotless. Everything had been professionally cleaned, erasing all potential evidence. So, like, what the heck, right? That doesn't sound like a typical procedure or process at all, especially when you have a victim who's been stabbed 20 times. By day 2, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office completed the autopsy. Pathologist Marlon Osborne noted all 20 stab wounds and 11 bruises, and he ruled the death as a homicide. He even wrote down, quote, "stabbed by another person," end quote, in his notes. So you'd think the Philadelphia police would then begin a criminal investigation, right? Well, that was not the case. Literally the next day after the autopsy was completed, Philadelphia police issued a public statement saying, quote, "The death of Ellen Greenberg has not been ruled a homicide," end quote. And here's where things start to get strange. After the apartment had been professionally cleaned, Samuel's uncle, who also just so happened to be a really prominent judge in Pennsylvania, went into their apartment. For reasons no one has ever been able to explain, he grabbed their laptops, phones, and credit cards, which to me is highly suspicious, and he shouldn't have done that. He did end up having to hand those items over to police, but but still, it's just kind of odd. 2 months after Ellen died in such a gruesome way, her family experienced yet another blow. The medical examiner changed his ruling on her death certificate from homicide to suicide, and this was done after much persistence and pressure by the police, according to that medical examiner. Police are adamant that Ellen died by suicide, and they say this is because they found no evidence that anyone else was involved. They only found her DNA on the knife used to kill her, and her clothes, and after looking at the apartment's security footage, it didn't show anything suspicious. They said that since the door was locked, even though that was just Samuel's statement, she must have been alone, and the only other possible way into the apartment was from a balcony, but their apartment was on the 6th floor, so it was highly unlikely that anyone entered that way. And since it snowed that night, they went to check if there were any fresh footprints in the snow surrounding her apartment, but there were none. So they stood by the fact that she killed herself. Further proving this in their minds was the fact that in the months leading up to her death, Ellen started seeing a psychiatrist for anxiety about her job. She did have anxiety and was prescribed Klonopin and Ambien for it, which both could lead to suicidal thoughts. But according to her psychiatrist, Ellen had a visit just 2 weeks before her death, and she was happy, in good spirits, and was not suicidal. Ellen's family, on the other hand, do not agree with the suicide ruling, and they believe that Ellen was murdered. So while the case was formally closed, they started their own independent investigation, hiring other investigators and more well-known and reputable pathologists. After they reviewed her case, they all thought Ellen's death was strongly suspicious of being a homicide, and here's why. They noted that the type and number of wounds, which was 20, along with bloodstain patterns, are all consistent with a homicide. The focus was now on the sheer number of stab wounds that penetrated Ellen's brain. This pathologist found that the wounds to her brain and spinal cord would have obviously caused severe pain, but they would have also caused cranial nerve dysfunction and traumatic brain injuries. Furthermore, one of the stab wounds punctured her cranial cavity, and this wound alone would have either instantly killed her or, at the very least, rendered her immediately unconscious. There would have been no way that she was conscious after the stab wound to continue on stabbing herself the rest of the 20 times, especially on her neck and back, which is what the police are saying she did. So this is when the independent pathologist went back to look at the original medical reports, and boy did he find something suspicious. The neuropathologist who examined Ellen after she died never noted any such wound. He never noted that any of the stab wounds had penetrated so deep into her brain and spinal cord that she would have rendered herself unconscious, which is odd considering this is almost proof that she did not do this to herself. When asked about this years later, the original neuropathologist said he had no recollection of the case. And adding even more suspicion and mystery to this is the fact that when the family's investigator looked into this, they didn't find a single report or invoice, or anything at all for that matter, ever filed by this neuropathologist. This is extremely unusual and suspicious considering this was a really well-known and regarded neuropathologist. Yet somehow, now there was seemingly no physical tie or paper trail tying him to Ellen's case. Then after looking more into Ellen's wounds, they found that there were multiple that had occurred after she was already dead. Some of her stab wounds were absent of blood, meaning this happened after her heart had already stopped beating, and police say she continued stabbing herself. But tell me, exactly how was that possible if she was dead? So this is kind of when the new investigators on the case started looking at Samuel, Ellen's fiance, and this is when they reportedly noticed some weird inconsistencies in his story. When Samuel called 911, he said that he was with a security guard when he kicked down the door and found Ellen, but the security guard that was working at the time said that she was in fact not there. So it came to light that Samuel was lying about that. And to back this up, investigators reviewed the security footage coming in and out of the elevator on Ellen's floor. And this showed Samuel by himself when he said he found Ellen. And what's even weirder is that right after this happened, 2 of Samuel's relatives came forward and said that they had been talking on the phone with him as he kicked down the door and found Ellen. But after combing through phone records, this was proven to not be true. Then it was questioned if the door was ever really locked like Samuel said. Since this was a swing bar latch, authorities said it must have been locked from the inside, meaning Ellen was in the apartment by herself. But according to the apartment manager, she said that it's actually possible for the lock to have locked on its own, depending on how the door was shut. She said that it's even happened to her a few times, and just because Samuel said that it was locked doesn't mean that it had actually been physically locked from the inside. And a former FBI agent actually questions if Samuel ever really kicked in the door, because if you look at the crime scene photos, there's hardly any damage to the door at all. So again, this kind of contradicts what the police are saying happened, which is a major red flag. Over the years, Ellen's parents continued to fight for justice for their daughter, pleading with authorities to reopen the case and consider all of the new evidence they found. But still, they remained steady in the fact that Ellen ended her own life. This is when a crime scene reconstruction specialist stepped in and examined the crime scene. And according to them, it appears Ellen's body had actually been moved after her death. And if that wasn't enough proof for you, this is when a 3D anatomical recreation of her body was generated. And the findings from that only add more suspicion to this case. From that recreation, it was found that not all of her stab wounds could have been self-inflicted. I mean, it sounds kind of obvious with the way she was stabbed in her back, but with this finding, it proved that it was just physically impossible for her to have done this to herself. They also found evidence that a second knife may have been used in Ellen's death. The independent pathologist hired by the Greenberg family then found even more damning evidence. And if this doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. This pathologist found a hemorrhage in Ellen's neck muscles that suggested she had been strangled prior to her death. And according to him, he says that the bruises that were in various stages of healing on Ellen's body were consistent with a repeated beating. In other words, this suggests that she could have been physically abused in the days leading up to her death. Like I mentioned earlier though, Ellen was seeing a psychiatrist prior to her death, and according to them, she never once mentioned anything about abuse, and she seemed happy and content in her relationship. Another point of contention was the knife sticking out of her chest, which meant that this was the last spot where the knife was inserted. Investigators stated that it would have been highly unlikely for her to have driven the knife into her own chest with enough force for it to stay there. Even if your mind was telling you to do that, your body just physically couldn't do it, especially considering she'd already suffered serious stab wounds before this final blow. The other thing that's odd is the fact that Ellen was stabbed through her clothes, which is highly unusual in a suicide. So Ellen's family and the independent investigators presented all of this new information to authorities, and in 2019, her family filed a civil lawsuit against the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office, as well as the original pathologist, Dr. Marlon Osborne. They basically just wanted them to change the suicide ruling to homicide, or even just undetermined, because it really doesn't look like Ellen did this to herself. This is when Dr. Osborne outright admitted that the only reason he changed the homicide ruling to suicide was because the Philadelphia police pushed him to do it. This was enough for Ellen's case to actually be reopened, this time by another district attorney's office in 2022, and this gave Ellen's family some hope. This is when investigators sent off a portion of Ellen's spinal column to an outside lab for a fresh analysis, and the results are chilling. They found that the most severe wound to the back of Ellen's neck was penetrated so deep that it would have instantly paralyzed her, rendering her unable to continue stabbing herself. This was great news, but just 3 months later, this finding would be overturned, and for some reason, it was then thrown out and dismissed. And sadly, the hope for justice didn't last long because they ultimately concluded once again that Ellen ended her own life, even despite the mounds of evidence otherwise. This didn't stop her family though, and because of how hard they pushed, Ellen's case went on to gain national attention. And finally, after multiple lawsuits and an online petition that gained over 166,000 signatures, in February of this year, Ellen's case was officially reopened. This came to fruition after the original pathologist, Dr. Osborne, came forward and said that he changed his mind, and he doesn't believe Ellen ended her own life. He wrote an official statement saying he has amended his position on her cause of death after examining new evidence. He said that there's just too much contradicting evidence to say that she did this to herself. So finally, after all these years, her case is reopened once again. Unfortunately though, Dr. Osborne is no longer employed by the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office. So while his mind changing is a good thing, this essentially does not affect the case or the suicide ruling. So as of today, Ellen's official cause of death remains a suicide, and there have been no arrests made in this case or even any persons of interest. But I'm hoping this time she will get a proper investigation, because how on earth could she have done this to herself? It's one thing that I will never understand or agree with, and why it's being covered up, I have no idea. But it's now been 14 years, and whatever happened to Ellen that winter night remains a mystery.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
A Subway worker was killed over an argument about too much mayonnaise. 26-year-old Brittany Macon was working at a Subway in Atlanta in June 2022. It was a normal day at work for her until a terrifying incident occurred. She was working with her colleague Jada Statham, who was 24 at the time, when a man named Melvin Williams entered the store. It's believed that after ordering food, an argument erupted between him and the employees over him having too much mayo on his sandwich. The store owner described how all hell broke loose. Brittany was shot and tragically died as a result. Jada's 5-year-old son was actually in the restaurant at the time and witnessed the whole hideous ordeal. Jada was shot, but thankfully she survived. Melvin is charged with murder and aggravated assault among other related charges. Thankfully, he is currently behind bars while he awaits his trial, which has not been yet scheduled.
My parents locked me in a freezer for 2 weeks. My name is Marina Sabatier, and I am 8 years old. I was born in 2001 of an unwanted pregnancy, and my mother initially abandoned me but changed her mind after a month and regained custody of me. From the age of 2, my mother began to abuse me. She deprived me of food, hit me, and made me take cold showers. She would take me to the basement to beat me so that the neighbors wouldn't suspect. She would also force me to eat my own vomit. As time went by, the torture became more and more violent. My parents would tie me to the bed with tape and force me, for example, to swallow spoonfuls of salt and vinegar. I stopped going to school because I was too mentally and physically exhausted from my mother's beatings, and the others might have suspected something. One day I succumbed to the beatings and died in the basement where I used to be beaten. My parents put my lifeless body in the freezer for 2 weeks, then put me in a plastic box and covered it with cement. Shortly after reporting my disappearance, my parents confessed to my murder and were sentenced to just 30 years in prison.
Have you ever wondered why no anime character looks like a human? Well, that's because they're actually based off of cats. Okay, so this person asked, why in Japanese anime do none of the characters look Japanese? And it's because anime characters are cats. The goal of manga anime was neither Japanese nor Caucasian. The theory that if you pursue cute, it resembles a kitten is influential. No matter how you look at the profile nose, it's not human. And just take a look, that does not look like a human nose, but it does look like a cat's nose. Just look at this picture for 1 second. Are you actually going to tell me that these characters do not look like those kittens? It's honestly identical, and it's just cats in kind of a human form. Japanese anime characters are actually based on kittens and not Westerners. So the real question is, if you're obsessed with anime and think all the characters are cute or hot, does that mean you find cats attractive? I'm just joking, but this is absolutely mind-blowing and I never heard about this until today. So please let me know your thoughts on this because I'm extremely curious. This is what will happen when Kim Jong-un passes away. Up first, the entire country of North Korea will be completely devastated, and they will all be crying in the streets. This is because they literally look at Kim Jong-un as a god. This is because he brainwashed his citizens this bad that they actually believe this stuff. So it's like losing a parent to them. Next up, North Korea will most likely collapse. If political order was not restored quickly, the country could easily and most likely go into a civil war. Also, Kim Jong-un has no family member to take his place since he killed his own brother. That was the only one that could have taken his place. Next up, there very well could be a nuclear war. We all know Kim Jong-un has spent a lot of time and energy on creating and producing nuclear weapons, and we all know he threatened the world to use them multiple times. So what if his dying wish is to launch all of his nuclear weapons onto the world and just completely take everybody out with him? This is absolutely scary, but if there's one man that would do this, it's definitely Kim Jong-un. Okay, so this invention might be able to save you from the end of the world. Okay, so we all know that a great flood or a tsunami is one of the most likely things to knock out humanity. It's been told to happen in the past, like with Noah's Ark and other stories. But what if it happened today? How would we prepare? Well, an Australian shipbuilder whose name is Matt Duncan designed a tsunami survival pod that can withstand 6 tons of debris and hold up to 4 people. And the thing is, it only cost $8,500, so let me know if you're going to get it.
Died by drinking 14 liters of water in a competition to try to win a Nintendo Wii console. My name is Jennifer Strange, and I was 28 years old when I decided to participate in a competition that was broadcast on the local radio in California. The contest, called Hold Your Pee for a Wee, was simple. The person who could drink the most liquid in 1 hour without using the bathroom would walk away with a wee, and I really wanted it for my children. The competition started, and I drank over 14 liters of water. I quickly began to feel dizzy, nauseous, and had a severe headache. Several times I complained about the pain I was experiencing, but the organizers pretended not to understand. One of the hosts even laughed, saying I looked pregnant. A few hours later, while I was at home, I died in my bathroom. My body had taken in more water than it could handle. I died, leaving behind my 11-month-old daughter, my 2 boys, and my husband. The local station KNBR, which had organized the competition, was sentenced to pay a fine of $1.7 million to my family, and the show's host, Dave Sholin, was fired.
This woman jumped off a top-floor balcony to escape her jealous boyfriend. 28-year-old Amy Beckley had been dating 28-year-old footballer Shaquille McDonald for about 6 weeks. Shaquille played professional football for clubs such as Derby County and Coventry. She said that in the first few weeks of them dating, he love-bombed her and showered her with affection. She was a single mum and really appreciated having someone looking after her and caring for her. However, she saw a completely different side to him when they were on a night out in March 2023. They'd been out in Arcadian in Birmingham when he accused her of speaking to a bouncer. He snatched her phone and keys and called her derogatory names and made her get in a taxi with him. In the taxi, he put her in a headlock, bit her, scratched her, and slapped her. After they got home, CCTV captured him launching another vicious attack at her. He smashed her into a concrete wall, dragged her inside, and strangled her repeatedly. She lost consciousness and he left the room, and when she came to, she tried to ring 999 on silent. However, she became so terrified of him that she jumped 14 foot from her top floor balcony to escape him. She broke both arms in doing so. Now, luckily her fall was broken slightly by a balcony below hers, and someone had been outside having a cigarette at the time. They helped her inside and got her some help. Police arrived and Shaquille tried to flee but was detained. Amy was in an absolutely horrific state. You can see the images on Google if you want to go and look at those, but they are really shocking. Shaquille was jailed for just 2 years and 8 months after admitting to actual bodily harm and strangulation.
I played darts on my mother's decapitated head. My name is Ed Kemper, and here's my horrible story. One evening, my mother returned drunk from an evening. She was making a lot of noise and woke me up, so in an excess of anger, I slit her throat and tore her head. I inserted my penis into her decapitated head. Then I hung his head on the wall and threw darts to play. I finally crushed the bones of the skull with my feet and pulled out his tongue. His tongue kept shouting and complaining. I ended up calling the police and denouncing myself. Then I was imprisoned for life. I wanted to commit suicide twice in prison, but I was saved by guards.
Man did the unthinkable to a hospitalised child in Blackburn. It was the 15th of May 1948 in Lancashire. June Ann Devaney was just 3 years old when she was admitted to Queen's Park Hospital in Blackburn with pneumonia. She was under the care of nurse Gwendolyn Humphreys on the night in question. Now, little June had actually improved quite a lot and she was due to be discharged the next morning. Then, disturbingly, at around 1:20 a.m, while the nurse was preparing things in the back room, she felt a cold draft and noticed a door open. She went to see what was going on and was horrified when she saw one of the cots was empty. She then noticed something terrifying, a trail of adult footprints leading to the door. The nurse raised the alarm and contacted police. At 3:17 a.m, tragically they found the little child's body. She was face down in the grass not far from the ward. She was partially clothed with bloodstains on her body. The hospital immediately became a crime scene and a murder investigation began. The post-mortem found that the child had been AR'd and had teeth marks in her. A taxi driver reported to police that he had picked up a man with a local accent close to the hospital on the night of the crime. Now, the killer's fingerprints were actually found on a bottle next to June's cot. Over 46,000 sets of prints were tested against these until finally a match. The killer was Peter Griffiths, who eventually confessed. He pleaded guilty due to insanity and said he was drunk at the time and killed June in a fit of rage. He was found guilty of the crime and sentenced to death and was executed aged 22.
Barbie has a much creepier history than I thought. I'm going to show you some theories about Barbie that have been keeping me up at night, and I cover all sorts of creepy and true crime stuff, so follow along. In 2010, Barbie released a doll that had a camera on her necklace as well as a video screen on her back. This doll has since been discontinued, but there's a lot of rumors about what happened to this footage when it was recorded. So people have always theorized that the footage was collected and sold either by Mattel or by someone more nefarious. And it's been mentioned how easy it would have been for hackers to collect and sell all this data. The FBI even put out a statement about it. Barbie also released and discontinued the Hello doll, which could listen to children and respond with over 8,000 pre-recorded answers. A lot of parents worried that these dolls were potentially recording their children and then selling that data, but this doll also has really concerning reviews. Like, people say that the doll won't take no for an answer. Like, if she asked if you wanted to hear a story and then you said no, she would actually push back and then just tell you the story anyways. And the doll would also ask really specific and targeted questions about children, like how big their families were and if they had any siblings. Was this doll just collecting market data on children, or was it something much weirder?
This former teacher made an unaliving pact with a student that she kidnapped and assaulted. This is Kara Dickey, and she was 34 years old when she assaulted a 14-year-old student of hers. Now, at the time of her arrest, Kara Dickey was a middle school teacher. She was married, she had kids of her own, but she somehow got involved with a 14-year-old student of hers. And quickly, the relationship between her and her student grew from platonic to extremely inappropriate. She was sending him inappropriate text messages, and at one point it began to get physical. And on the afternoon of June 16, 2008, she went to the kid's house, picked him up, supplied him with rum and various over-the-counter drugs, and then took him on a road trip visiting many locations around the Buffalo, New York area, all the while they were engaging in inappropriate behavior with each other, if you know what I mean. And in an even more disturbing twist, she actually made a pact with the child that she was abusing that they would both take their own lives if they were ever caught by the police. Obviously, this never happened because she was caught by the police, brought to trial, and she was convicted of the assault of a child. And she served a few years in prison for these charges, but she was released in 2014 and just 2 years later was back in prison because one day she said she was done with parole, she cut off her ankle monitor and went on the run. Now, obviously, the police eventually caught up with her again. She was sent back to prison, and then after her release in 2018, she violated the terms of her parole again and was sent back to prison. And this time, people thought that she may have been involved with another child. I don't know, people like this are dangerous, and this story goes to show that pedophiles aren't always men.
Part 2 of the Amara Carson case, just a quick trigger warning here. Amara's injuries are horrific and it's particularly hard to listen to. Amara had been beaten so severely that the multitude of fractures to her skull connected with each other. Her brain was torn, an arm and a leg had spiral fractures from being twisted. Her torso had been squeezed with a lot of force until her ribs and sternum broke, and there were 24 human bite marks all over her tiny body. Her head and face were completely swollen and bruised. Her liver was torn, as was her private area. Underneath her tongue was torn, and she'd also been strangled. The severity of Amara's injuries made it impossible to tell which was the final injury, so a cause of death couldn't be determined. Eventually it was determined that Amara had been tortured for around 30 hours, with different stages of the exorcism occurring. Blaine had been the one to cause all the injuries, while Jessica sat in another room listening to her daughter's screams. Jessica said that Amara had managed to escape the room a couple of times and run towards her, before Blaine took her back into the room to be tortured further. Jessica was fully complicit in the murder and she made absolutely no attempts to protect her child. The couple were arrested for the murder of baby Amara. They were both found guilty. Jessica was sentenced to life without parole for capital murder, while Blaine received the death penalty. Blaine Milan was due to be executed by lethal injection on January 21st, 2021. However, he won a stay of execution and remains on death row.
Okay, so this is kind of a weird thing that's happening, but the head of Scientology, David Miscavige, is reportedly missing. He's currently under investigation for child trafficking, and lawyers have tried to serve him 27 times in the last 4 months, but no one knows where he is. The charges come from 3 victims who claim that Miscavige forced them to work on boats as children after they were also forced to sign a $1 billion contract. In Scientology, they consider you to be an adult at 6 years old. One of the victims also claimed that after her mother left Scientology, the victim was forced to stay in a closet for 48 hours. All of this, of course, also comes after Shelley Miscavige, David's wife, has not been seen since 2007, even though recently it's been reported that she might be living in Big Bear, California.
This girl vanished after seeing H in concert in Birmingham. What police found in a park the next day shocked the community. Keely Bunker from Tamworth in Staffordshire had only just celebrated her 20th birthday. 12 days later, she was going to see H in concert to continue the celebrations. It was the 19th of September 2019 and Keely and her friend attended the show. Afterwards, they headed to the nightclub Snobs. The girls were having a seemingly normal night out and were surrounded by friends. This included 20-year-old Wesley Street. Now, Keely and Wesley were actually childhood friends. They'd known each other since infant school, so this wasn't unusual. They headed back to Tamworth in a taxi after the night out, and Keely's friend Monique actually offered her to sleep over at her house. However, Keely replied quite chillingly, "I've got Wes, he'll walk me back, it'll be fine." That evening though, Keely would not be fine. She trusted Wesley to walk her home, but he took her on a detour. It's believed that he may have convinced her to go to the rugby club to have a smoke with him. When Keely failed to turn up for an interview the next day, her dad rang the police. Everyone knew that Wesley was the last person to have seen Keely, so the police questioned him. He claimed that they had walked home together and he'd last seen her by a phone box by his house. He gave police a detailed account of their route back and seemed like he wanted to help. Tragically, Keely's body was found at 9 p.m. that night, lying face down in a pool near the edge of Wigington Park. Wesley was arrested and tellingly, police noticed he had scratches on his face. GPS, DNA and CCTV evidence all proved that Wesley's account of what happened that night was a lie. CCTV captured the pair at Tamworth Rugby Club at 4:23 a.m. Keely's bag was found a short distance away. Wesley's jacket was found in the park with makeup all over the sleeves. His DNA was also found on Keely during a post-mortem, which proved he had SA'd her. He was found to have choked her to death before going home to bed. In court, he was also found guilty of 5 further S offences which took place in 2015, 2017 and 2019. He faces a minimum of 29 years in prison.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
This entire family have been missing since February. Monica and her 2 sons, Aidan 11 and Nicholas 9, are thought to be in grave danger. So where are the Lutz family? Stephen Lutz, 44, a drug user and suffering from multiple personality disorder, turned up at the family home on the 10th of February in his pickup truck with a U-Haul attached to the back. The whole family left the residence and haven't been seen since. The phones have been disconnected and his wife and 2 sons are thought to be in grave danger. In January, Monica and her 2 sons were seen fleeing from the house barefoot. They ran to a neighbour's to call 911. Stephen had become extremely violent and had punched Monica in the face. Stephen was arrested, given a restraining order and warned to stay away from his wife and sons. Stephen was already known to the police. He'd been known to them since 2006 for his use of methamphetamine and for his violence. What's really scary about this story, and the main reason I think that this family are in danger, is that 11-year-old Aidan told his grandmother and his sister, who's estranged from the parents, that he twice walked in on his father talking to a clown mask on his bedroom wall. What he said sent actual shivers down my spine. He said, "I know what I have to do. I have to kill 3 people. First my wife Monica, then Aidan, and then Nicholas." This is the boy's older sister who's estranged from both her parents. Aidan had texted her on the day of the disappearance, saying that the family were going on vacation, but he didn't know where. His phone was disconnected shortly after. The family home was inspected on April 3rd. There were sheets on the windows, and the once immaculate house looked as if a tornado had hit every corner. There was an open suitcase on the bed, and it looked like someone had been packing but got disturbed. According to Gia Wright of the Missing Persons Awareness Network, Stephen had stole $10,000 from a safety deposit box belonging to his mother the day before the disappearance and told her, "You're never going to see me again." The last place that the family's phones pinged their location was Richmond, Indiana, and their car registration plate has been scanned in 7 states in the US, but hasn't been registered for several weeks. It's an absolute mystery, and I pray that this family are found before something terrible happens.
This is Ghost Rider 2.0, one of the worst cartel execution videos ever explained. Just like the Ghost Rider cartel video, this video is extremely hard to watch. The video is kinda short, lasting only 1 minute and 35 seconds, and as you play the video, you see a man with his hands tied behind his back, and he is sitting on the ground wearing jeans and a blue shirt. His head is bleeding and it's clear he got multiple injuries off camera. Multiple men can be heard in the background and one of them seems to be interrogating the victim. As the victim is being interrogated, another man pulls the rope around his wrist, making sure it's tight. And for whatever reason, they place a hat on the victim's head. The leading theory is that it represents some gang which maybe the victim is part of. They then smack the victim around for a couple seconds, then another man enters the shot carrying a log that was recently in a fire. The log is smoking and smoldering, but it's not on fire. You see the hot charcoal glowing at the end of the log. The man then gets the log and places the hot end against the victim's chest, which makes the victim let out a terrifying scream. The victim then rolls around on the ground trying to get away from the man, but he then places the hot log against his back, and again causing the victim to scream horribly. The video then jump cuts and it shows the man pinning the victim down with the log by pushing it into the back of his neck. This immobilizes the victim as he's forced to take the unbearable heat of the log. At this point, you see the victim's jeans have been stripped and you see the skin around his thighs peeling off. This is due to the severe burning done off camera. The victim continues rolling around, but when he turns over on his back, he is then burned with the log on the side of his neck. They stop burning the victim for a couple seconds and he then sits up. Then, another man pours a clear liquid over his head, completely soaking his hair, clothes, and face. The other man then places the red-hot log between his legs, burning his exposed genitals. And this is where things take a turn for the worst. The video then jump cuts again, and it shows the awful sight of the victim's head being set on fire as well as his genitals. The fire completely engulfed the victim's head, face, and shoulders. Though he is still alive rolling around on the ground, which is why people refer to this video as Ghost Rider 2.0. As the video continues, the men insult the victim as he's on fire. The video ends as the victim is still alive rolling around on the ground, but he has stopped screaming at this point. This could be due to his damaged vocal cords from the fire. There's no reports about the victim's fate, but it's safe to assume they ended up killing him. This video and case is absolutely horrific, and it's just sad and scary that stuff like this happens daily to people. Take this warning and never go searching for this video because it's absolutely horrible.
Harvey Weinstein is one of the worst sexual predators in American history, and he was able to get away with these horrific crimes for years, so let's take a look at his story. I'm going to warn you right now, we're going to go through some graphic details, so viewer discretion is advised. Harvey Weinstein was born in 1952 in Queens, New York. In his youth, he and his brother were concert promoters and brought a lot of musical acts to New York City, including bands like The Who and the Rolling Stones. And eventually, after making some money with his concert business, he and his brother started a film production company. This company was named Miramax, named after the Weinstein's parents, Miriam and Max. Miramax would go on to become one of the most successful companies in all of Hollywood. And I mean, just look at this. This is a sample of some of their films, from Scream to Tarantino films to No Country for Old Men. In the 90s and 2000s, you pretty much couldn't watch a good movie without seeing the Miramax logo up front. And this led Harvey Weinstein to have incredible power in Hollywood. I mean, this guy's touch was like the Midas touch. Pretty much anything he touched turned to gold. He and his brother just had this way of looking at movies where they could take even a bad movie and turn it into an overnight success. And people in Hollywood around this time said that they loved Harvey Weinstein. They were thanking him in all of their speeches at awards shows. They were claiming that he was one of the best people on the planet, that they loved him so much. Even people like Michelle and Barack Obama hosted him at one of their events. I mean, Harvey Weinstein was plugged up with the elitist of the elite. I don't know if that's how you say that. In 2005, Harvey and his brother left Miramax and started their own company, the Weinstein Company. And this company would also go on to produce a number of huge Hollywood films. And everything was going swell for Harvey. That is, until the year 2017. And also, before we get to that, I have to add in here that Harvey Weinstein was a hard supporter of Roman Polanski. He said that they should just let the case go and they should never charge Roman Polanski for what he did to a minor back in the 70s. So 2017 was a year of reckoning. And in October of that year, the New York Times and the New Yorker posted stories about various women that had come forward with allegations of assault against Harvey Weinstein. These had all been A-list Hollywood actresses that had been assaulted by Weinstein in public, in his hotel room, in his offices. And when this started coming out, I can remember people started to realize that Harvey Weinstein was an absolute monster. So according to all of these women that came forward, there was almost a pattern in Harvey Weinstein's assaults. He would invite promising actresses to come to his hotel room, his office, wherever he was staying, and he would act like this was going to be a business meeting or something that they had to come to. But when they would get there, he would be in a state of undress. He might have been in a bathrobe or in his underwear. He would ask them for a massage, and when they would say no, or even if they would participate in it, things would take a dark twist and he would then assault them. There were also dozens and dozens of other A-list celebrities and women who came forward who said that even though he hadn't physically assaulted them, he had harassed them so many times that they had to tell him to stop. There are also actresses out there that claim that because they rejected Harvey Weinstein's advances, he totally ruined their careers in Hollywood. He would go forth and make sure they could never work on a production in Hollywood, and he basically put a stop on their careers, even if they were getting really big. So this is really a story of power. Harvey Weinstein had so much unchecked power in Hollywood because he was such a successful producer and head of such a big studio that he was allowed to do whatever he wanted to. And in my opinion, lots and lots of people knew that this was going on, people that worked closely with Harvey, and they just chose to say nothing for so many years, which I think is just so utterly and completely disgusting. I also do want to note here as well that Harvey Weinstein was really good friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and he and Jeffrey had invested together in the past. So all this came to a head when on May 25th, 2018, Harvey Weinstein was finally arrested. And eventually, after the trial, Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison in New York, and he was set to serve his sentence out on Rikers Island, one of the most notorious prisons in all of America. Eventually, he was extradited to Los Angeles, where he took part in another trial, and just this year, he was sentenced to 16 more years in California. This means that his prison sentence is almost 40 years long, and hopefully he'll never see the light of day again. This is a story of power, of corruption, and how so much unchecked power can lead to some of the worst things imaginable. And it shows that even the elite members of our society aren't fully protected or given immunity from their crimes. And that even for Harvey Weinstein, when the bell tolls, sometimes you have to answer the call.
Killer accidentally admitted to his crimes by accident when he forgot he was wearing a microphone while taking part in a documentary. This is how a true crime documentary exposed a killer. In 1971, Robert Durst met Kathleen McCormack and they got married. At the time of her disappearance in 1982, Kathleen had nearly graduated college. She was last seen by a witness at a dinner party where she appeared to be upset. She got a call from Robert and left. Robert admitted to having argued with Kathleen that night, but he said he put her on a train to New York and then never saw her again. Her friend called police to report her missing. Interestingly, Kathleen had been treated at a medical centre for facial bruises weeks prior to this and told the friend that Robert had done it. Robert had actually been dating someone else for some time prior to this and had been living separately to Kathleen. When her family broke into her cottage to try and find out where she was, they found the place had been trashed and her possessions put in the bin. Kathleen's family always believed that Robert was involved in her disappearance. In 2000, Susan Berman, a friend of Robert's, was found murdered. Now, she'd actually provided Robert with an alibi for Kathleen's disappearance. Now, pay really close attention to this next bit. Days after she was killed, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department contained Susan's address and the word cadaver on it. On the envelope, Beverly was misspelled. Robert admitted in 2005 that Susan had called him shortly before her death to say that the police wanted to question her about Kathleen going missing. It's believed that Robert killed Susan to keep her quiet. In 2001, Robert's neighbour's body parts were found floating in Galveston Bay. Robert's elderly neighbour, Morris Black, had been killed and Robert was arrested. He was actually released on bail and fled and was found about a month later in Pennsylvania. He was found with $37,000 cash, 2 weapons, and interestingly, Morris Black's driving license. In court, Robert claimed he was acting in self-defense. He said he'd accidentally shot Morris and dismembered his body. Due to lack of forensics, he only got 5 years in jail. This is where things get really crazy. HBO was filming a documentary called The Jinx. During production, Susan's stepson found a letter written by Robert. This contained the same spelling error in the word Beverly as the anonymous letter to police. This implicated Robert in the murder. Now, while filming the documentary, Robert needed the toilet. He forgot that he had a microphone still attached to him. He was recorded talking to himself. He said, "There it is, you're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him." And then he said, "What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong. And finally he said, "I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course."